Hi, everyone. Welcome to this Ask the Expert session. My name is Lior Kamrat, and I will do my very best to be your moderator for this fine session. We have a group of experts here to take all your questions, everything that you need to know following the session that you just watched. So I'm just gonna go around the table and start with you, George. George, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is George Palma, and I'm the Principal PM Lead for Azure Kubernetes Service.
Olivia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia. I'm a product manager for Mariner in the Linux Systems Group at Microsoft.
And Ryan.
Hello, I'm Ryan Campbell. I'm a software engineer in Azure Space.
Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Perrin. I'm a Principal PM Lead for Mariner.
And Matt.
Hey everyone, my name is Matt Thalman. I'm an engineer on the .NET team, and I focus on the official .NET container images.
David.
Hello everyone, very excited to be here, and I am a software engineering manager in Azure Space.
And last but not least, Alessandro.
Hi everyone, Alessandro, I'm a software engineer on Dapr.
Cool. So as you can see, a very good group of people we have here and tons of expertise here in this session. My name is Lior Kamrat. I'm focusing on the Azure Arc platform team. So I'll be here to take any questions you may have on the Azure hybrid space. To kick things off, while we're getting those questions coming in, George, I want to start with you. We just watched the session. Obviously, you and the rest of the group presented in this session. And the first question that I want to ask you is, what was the thing that got you excited about all those things that we announced in this session?
Wow, yeah, that's so many things. I think one of the key things that kind of comes out for me is the breadth that we had and kind of the focus we had on these two different personas out there, from obviously a big focus on the developer, but also a good focus on the operator, security, and also how we can optimize some of the things from all the container images to the cluster to storage. So just a great thing to see that the focus on essentially delivering cloud native applications through a cluster all the way to the edge and the ultimate edge in space, and just awesome to see that use case as well in the International Space Station.
George, definitely a very eventful session. There's a lot of things that we announced. I do have a question that is coming from the chat, and I think Olivia, this one is for you. For AKS nodes, do you plan to offer Mariner images?
That's something that is definitely up for discussion with the AKS team, but I can't share any plans around it.
All right. So anyone from the AKS team wants to take that question?
Maybe. What's your interest in the Mariner images would be my question to the user. So if you can share a bit more about that, we can definitely riff a little bit about it with the Mariner team. So we're always going to be committed to do what is best for our users. So if there's interest in having Mariner as a node option, we can definitely look into it.
All right. So for the person that asked the question, I don't see the names, but if you want to provide some more details, that can be very helpful. So the team can jump in and provide more context there. Continuing on the Mariner side of the house, Olivia, I did want to ask you, what are the use cases that we're seeing for this in terms of customers? Like, how do we think customers will actually going to use this?
Yeah, sure. So in our presentation, I talked mostly about the container host and then the base container and distroless containers, but we also have virtual machine images available as well, and some teams using Mariner as a bare metal application. So pretty broad range of use cases.
All right, and I do see Alessandro. Thank you for jumping on the questions. One thing that I did wanted to bring up, Alessandro, we saw a question coming in the session itself about Dapr. Started with an open source project, now went from the incubation team, went to productization. Just wanted to get your take on where we are taking with this. I do know that we have the Dapr extension coming into Azure Arc, which is something that we're working on. But generally speaking, how do we see customers are actually using this in production, and what are the real use cases that are being leveraged?
Yeah, for sure. Today we had two big announcements for Dapr. One was, as you were mentioning, the extension for AKS that also works on Arc, but we also announced the general availability of Azure Container Apps, in which Dapr is available for everyone for free, and it's actually part of the experience. We're very excited about Dapr. We think that it makes developing applications that use microservices and are cloud native much easier. As Donovan was saying in the session, you don't have to use all of the Dapr building blocks, but they do offer a lot that can make your life much easier. This is what I like to say about Dapr, which is not approved by our marketing team, is that if you're building an app that uses microservices, you have two choices. You either use Dapr or you find yourself re-implementing what Dapr does for you. So you choose which one is the best one for you. We're very excited. The project is now part of the CNCF, so it's not part of Microsoft, although Microsoft does contribute to that a lot. But we work with every cloud on the cloud and edge, and every technology, every programming language, etc.
Thank you, Alessandro, for that. And we do have a question coming. So there was mention to a new routing product in Scott Guthrie's session. Is anyone from the expert want to jump in and talk about the new options with private network and why it's so hard to configure? Any discussion points around that? Any use cases that you're seeing in the wild for this?
Yeah, I think the question is probably referring to web app routing. That was both on the keynote and it was also on the demo and in the announcements that we did. So if you didn't catch it, we expanded a little bit on that announcement and we demoed how it works. Currently, web app routing is essentially an in-cluster ingress controller that is fully managed and integrated with certificates as well as DNS. We are working, and I saw some of the questions during the session as well. We are working on expanding that. That is an initial set of capabilities where we are going to provide additional DNS management and creation, as well as additional certificate management and creation for Azure emitted certificates itself. Right now, it's fully integrated and it's fully automatically scalable, managed lifecycle, etc. And it is to kind of address as well some of the architectural differences between it and AGIC, the App Gateway Ingress Controller. We still recommend AGIC for most use cases, but there are several use cases that might require additional capabilities or where the user might actually want to have that running in the cluster, or they might not have control over kind of what their applications require from an Ingress perspective. And Nginx is kind of the vanilla option for Ingress controllers in the wild, and so it's why we decided to have web app routing with it.
George, there's a lot of conversation going on around, network topologies and architectures in the Kubernetes space. It's something that is definitely top of mind for a lot of customers. So I'm happy that we're touching that. And load balancers, generally speaking, is one of those topics that are really, kind of very charged topics for some reason, for many reasons, and I'm happy that we're touching to that. Those questions are, keep those coming. We do have a bunch of questions coming in. So for the experts, whoever wants to take this one, we do have a questions around Active Directory. So we're working on a proof of concept, and we would like to know the impact to our Azure AD production environment if we configure Azure AD with AKS. Are there any risks involved?
So not really. You can both add AD as an authentication or authorization mechanism to AKS. You can add it as you create a cluster. You can add it after you create a cluster. You can use it just for authentication. You can use it for authentication and authorization. More than a risk, I would say it is a must to have your cluster integrated with that, and especially as you move from just test clusters and dev clusters and you actually move into multiple clusters and maybe dozens or hundreds of clusters out there. You definitely want to make sure that your authentication is centralized, and even your authorization as well. Your access control is also centralized, ideally in a centralized directory like AD.
Thank you, George. There's another question coming on web applications routing. And with web applications routing, can you bring your own domains? Additionally, will it automatically work with application gateway backends?
So the answer is yes, you can absolutely bring your own domains, and we will be working on actually providing managed domains in the future. Right now, it only works with your own domains. And I think the second part of the question was, will it work with App Gateway in the future? And the answer is yes, but not today.
Thank you, George. I do want to come back to a question, and I think this one is kind of a combination between you, Matt, and Alessandro. So whoever wants to jump in on this one. There was a question around distroless containers as base image, and how do we run shell scripts in those images? And Alessandro, I saw that you jumped on the chat and said that you don't. And I would love if you can maybe, share what is the reason behind that?
Sure. Matt, do you want to share your thoughts, or should I go first?
Yeah, I can go as well. So with distroless, by its nature, there is no shell included in there, and that's intended to just basically have a bare bones implementation and removing all the extra stuff that isn't necessary to run an application. Now, there might be cases where an application does require a shell, because you might have an initialization script or something that is part of launching it. In that case, you should be able to install Bash and include that into the distroless container to have Bash available. So that's a possibility that you could do, and you can do things like that by using a multi-stage Docker file. So you're installing Bash in an installation stage, and then copying that installation to the distroless stage. So that's one way to do it, and essentially that technique is kind of demonstrated in the Docker file that I had shown in my portion of the demo, where we install several packages that are included that .NET depends on, and so another example of one of those packages would be Bash itself.
Great, Alessandro. Anything to add on this one?
No, I think what Matt shared is perfect.
All right. So we'll move on to the next question. We do have a question coming on the new managed Grafana offering that we have. So the question is, for the new managed Grafana, is it a one-to-one relationship to a cluster, or you can have your own managed Grafana instance pulling data from multiple AKS clusters?
I guess I'll take that one. The answer is it's one-to-many. And you can have multiple data sources for it, for it as well, not just necessarily AKS clusters, but a number of other things. You can pipe into it from VMs, clusters outside of Azure, etc.
All right, thank you, George. And I'm coming back to you, Alessandro, on this one. And this is a question that I'm also actually seeing a lot in the wild, working a lot with either Dapr or Service Mesh. And what are the use cases where you may need to use Dapr plus Service Mesh? And I would, if I may, I would add to that, what are the use cases that you need to use Dapr over Service Mesh and vice versa?
I would like to understand a bit more about the requirement for using Service Mesh. There's definitely some overlapping. In particular, in the case of service invocation, Dapr offers its own service discovery and its own way of invoking services, but there might be other situations in which using Service Mesh could be a requirement. For example, if you're trying to invoke a service that is not that is not connected to the Dapr network, that does not have a Dapr sidecar running with that. So if you want to discuss this further, I think it's an interesting scenario. I would like to ask that you maybe ping me offline, and we can take it from there based on your requirements as well.
Thank you, Alessandro. And obviously, we're going to share the details of the speakers, and the experts here on the panel are in the session description. So definitely you can reach out to any of them. Coming back, there is a follow-up question on the Grafana question. Will managed Grafana be able to pull from private AKS clusters as well?
I'm not sure if it's already possible today. I've had to follow it with the Grafana team, but it will be possible in the future if you can today. I believe in the public preview where it's on, it might not be possible, but it will.
Okay, thank you, George. And so there is a question which is kind of more of an how-to, but I think it will be a good question to, or a good answer to share with our viewers, just kind of as a maybe as a guideline or maybe instructions on where to go to understand what to do next. So the question is, I created a simple Node.js proof of concept with AKS and App Insights and had the impression that application map does not really acknowledge that the applications are running on AKS compute. Could you please comment on this or suggest a way to make it work?
Yeah, so I can take that one, more the monitoring side, application side. So that's probably correct. There is a codeless attached for AKS clusters. That is a GitHub project if you want to check it out. I'm not sure if you're using it already or not, but I definitely recommend that you check it out. But as of today, that's not an AKS add-on or fully baked into managed lifecycle. That should give you application map with some recognition that you're using containers, but it's still requiring a bit more integration with Kubernetes and AKS, which we're currently planning to do.
Thank you, George. So I'm looking at the chat. Please keep those questions coming. There is a question around how to secure the etcd database as well as best practice to restore, recover in case of a failure. Any of the experts want to take this one?
Yeah, so there's essentially a couple ways that you can think about secrets in general and etcd a little bit more specifically. For secrets, you really want to think about pod security in what regards to secrets and credentials, etc. in three ways. The ideal way is you're using something like workload identity and your pod has an identity and you're able to connect directly to whatever resource you're trying to get, a database or storage or whatever it might be. That's really the best way possible. Now, not everything obviously is fronted by AAD, unfortunately, so you will have all kinds of credentials that you need to store in secrets. The second best way that I typically would recommend is just keep those secrets in Key Vault, benefit from everything that an HSM gives you, benefit from automatic rotation in many cases, and use secret store CSI in order to mount them into pods. That would be my second kind of approach to manage secrets as part of a Kubernetes environment. Now, the third one, though, is in many cases you will want to use native secrets, and you will have to sometimes because maybe you're using an off-the-shelf application that is already leveraging Kubernetes secrets. And on those cases, they will be stored on etcd. And AKS is already kind of encrypting the etcd storage automatically, but that is the storage itself, and that's us encrypting it. So what we're providing now is something called KMS, which actually allows you to provide your own key that is residing on Key Vault and envelope encrypt all the secrets in etcd so that then they are encrypted and decrypted as the pods access them naturally, and you can still leverage native Kubernetes secrets. In terms of backups, if you're using a system like AKS is taking backups for you, so you don't need to worry about them. In terms of having custom backups, because you might want to yourself restore for whatever reason, you can use something like Valero, and Azure Backup is actually working on something for that really soon that we hope to announce also very soon.
Thank you, George. And there is an interesting question coming around, how do you do like legacy applications with regards to all the new announcement, the AKS infrastructure, architecture, all the stuff. So Matt, I wanna defer to you here, and we'll try to understand what the question, because it has a lot in it, but it's a bit hard to understand. So we'll do our best here. So when you when in new container space, when you're looking to containerize a legacy application, right, and a .NET application with multiple sites and services, and have those multiple containers end up in a Kubernetes pod, would multi-stage Docker files and Mariner would be a good solution for that use case? What are the things that you need to take into consideration? What files, if any, other than the Docker files utilizing Mariner are needed within the legacy .NET apps repo for this purpose? I hope that, it's, again, this is a pretty long question, and I hope that we can try our best to answer that.
Yeah, so I'm assuming that using the word legacy there is referring to .NET Framework. In that case, .NET Framework only runs on Windows environments, and so Mariner is Linux, and so that would not be possible to be running that there. So we do provide official .NET Framework container images, which are all based off of Windows Server Core for the container space. And I can provide a link on that for where we document those. But that would be the choice that you'd want to be using for legacy .NET Framework containers. And AKS does support Windows containers, so that would be an option for that.
Thank you for that, Matt. And I saw a question coming around Azure Arc and extensibility models. So, you know, if the experts don't mind, I'll take this one. So basically, you know, there was a question around, can Open Service Mesh be used with Azure Arc? What are the extensibility model and all those stuff? So in a nutshell, if you're thinking about Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes clusters, we have something called the extensibility model. That extensibility model talks about the fact that you can go deploy extensions against those clusters, and we're also bringing up extensions to the AKS space pretty soon. But really, if you're thinking about extensions, it's basically building blocks of capabilities that we're bringing against Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes clusters. And Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes clusters are basically Kubernetes clusters that are deployed outside of Azure. So think about a situation where you want to install Open Service Mesh, or you want to install Key Vault integration, or you want to you know, do something with GitOps, right? All those capabilities are lining up using extensions, and this is something that that we are pushing very hard on, because we believe that the extensibility model is the way moving forward when it comes to how do you go by and use all the things that are natively available to you today with Azure, but against Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes clusters. So I hope that help answer that question. I see a question here around, I see a few questions coming in. What does the future, so I'll hold that one, the future of AKS and HCI, I'll talk about that. Will managed Grafana be able to pull from private AKS clusters as well? I think that one we already touched on, right? And George, you already confirmed that this is the case, correct?
You just need to make sure that the outbound of the cluster itself can reach out to manage Grafana from like Azure Monitor or Prometheus or whatever source you have there.
All right. And I see another question on the hybrid space. What does the future of AKS and HCI for on-prem look like? We have an AKS cluster, but we need to run on bare metal, but don't want to hustle of running Kubernetes without the, I hope I'm reading this type, the nice theory of AKS. Okay. Well, generally speaking, AKS on HCI is an offering that is available today. In fact, in this build, we also announced single node availability or single node general availability and support. So basically, AKS on HCI is our strategy moving forward when it comes to bringing AKS on premises. We also have a few more things that we're developing right now in the context of AKS on other platforms, but AKS HCI, or AKS in that case, is the same offering that you're getting in terms of lifecycle management, governance, and security, the same way as you have AKS today. AKS HCI can be Arc enabled as well, so you can also do the things that you can do today with Azure Arc enabled Kubernetes against AKS on HCI. So I hope I'm answering that question. At the end of the day, the bare metal aspect is the HCI. So you know, that's going to be the target platform or the target infrastructure platform in order for you to actually go by an enablement. And more than happy to take this offline if you want to reach out to me and talk about this more, for sure, not a problem. Okay, we're coming down to our last questions. So let me just ask this. Where does pod managed identities support for Windows containers fall in the roadmap? Is there a best practice approach to follow until this is available for authenticating a pod to an external Windows servers, SQL Server, etc.?
So with there's the first thing to understand is that there are two kind of pod identities. That's why before I mentioned workload identity, not specifically pod identity. Pod identity is what we also call in some forums as pod identity v1. It's something that required components running on the cluster to kind of make that translation from identity to pod and ensure that all that functioning, that system to work correctly. We're currently working on something that you might see in some forms as Pod Identity v2, or as the proper name, Workload Identity. And that is actually a native integration from AD apps into the cluster by leveraging things like service account volume projection and other Kubernetes native technologies. What that actually allows you is for the pod to have that identity and use that identity by leveraging a native service account, as you would use for things used inside the cluster. And then it's that service account that is federated with AD itself. So the answer is, for workload identities, you can already do it, because it's actually not specific to Windows or Linux. It just works with any pod that can use service accounts. And so this is actually already available for you on this new format of pod identities. We are planning on GAing that later this year, early 2023.
Thank you, George. And to wrap things up, George, again, I'm staying with you here because we're coming up to the last minute. What will be the best way to for folks to get started with all the new things that we announced in this build and in the session before this one?
So I think there's, as I mentioned, there's quite a breadth of things here that we announced. Obviously, I'd love folks to get started on kind of AKS documentation. You will see a lot of the things there. But I think we had a link for all the things that were shared at the end of the session by Donovan, which is probably the best thing to get started, and it will route you to all the different announcements that we are doing today. So I'll paste it on the chat or to that question in a second.
Thank you, George. And to wrap things up, I just want to say thank you for everyone to jumping in. It was short and sweet, but definitely there are many opportunities to follow up with our experts. All the experts are in the session description, so make sure that you're capturing the ones that you want to reach out to, and we would love to follow up with you. Thank you, everyone, for attending this Ask the Expert session, and we will see you in the next ones. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, folks.